Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be talking about two very important stories. The first is in reference to what has been going on, especially in the aftermath of the violence that perpetrated on May 9th this year. And this is important in terms of the kind of vandalism that we have seen and the way that military and public installations have been targeted. Of course, there is strict action being taken against everybody who's involved, with consequences also meaning that the people are going to be tried under military and anti-terrorism courts. There is also, of course, the concern with regards to Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf's involvement in the entire matter, with, of course, the PTI chairman distancing himself from this incident and then also claiming that there needs to be an investigation in this regard. However, we have seen that in a recent press conference, the IGP Punjab Police has spoken with reference to the kind of evidence that is available of the involvement of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf leaders in this entire scenario, and said that there is evidence with regards that are pointing towards calls that have been made both on May 8th and May 9th, which are similar in nature, and they are connected with the people who have talked with regards to Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf on behalf of the party, and then also with reference to the people who are involved in actually targeting the military and state installations, including the Lahore Corps Commander's House or Jinnah House, and then also, of course, the GHQ. This is important in terms of the kind of developments we've also seen with reference to certain PTI leaders, including Dr. Yasmin Rashid, who was earlier by an anti-terrorism court in Lahore released, and the authorities were asked to set her free, claiming that there isn't much supporting evidence with regards to her involvement in the case. Neither was her name part of the first investigation report, and so this is not enough evidence for her to be part of this. Of course, the IGP Punjab Police has spoken with reference to this particular verdict of the anti-terrorism court, claiming that they will be approaching the Lahore High Court in this regard, and that they do indeed actually have evidence with regards to the presence of Dr. Yasmin Rashid in the Jinnah House and the number of calls that she has also made to the people who have been involved in this violence. And he also mentioned that there was need of more evidence to be collected, which is why her remand was requested, which was earlier denied by the court. So it's important now, of course, to be seen what sort of evidence actually exists and what's going to happen once the police investigation is in fact complete and the High Court is moved with reference to the involvement of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf and its leaders. Of course, many of the party members have already distanced themselves from the May 9th violence and condemned the attacks and have either left the party or politics in general. And some are, of course, forming their own factions, with rumors of another party emerging from Mr. Jahangir Tareen. Other PTI leaders have also talked about forming a group or a separate faction called the Democrats, which, of course, has also included important senior leaders from Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. But it remains to be seen what kind of a future holds for particularly these PTI leaders and the rest, and what sort of substance will these factions even have in the scenario that there are elections in the country later this year. So that's what we're going to be focusing on in our first segment of the show today. In our other segment, we're going to take a look at another very important aspect of what Pakistan is dealing with right now, of course, with regards to the economic situation of the country. We're very, very close to the end of the IMF package, which unfortunately we still haven't seen close. But the Prime Minister, in a recent interview, has reiterated his hope once again that the deal is in fact going to close within this month, which of course is a very, very short time for the staff level agreement and the board meeting to also be held simultaneously. But the Prime Minister reiterated that all the conditions with regards to the 9th review, which also include conditions that are part of the board meeting, in fact, have been met by Pakistan. And so he is hopeful that the IMF is going to actually close the deal and there will be good news for the country in Pakistan. And of course, we all hope that that is in fact true and that we're able to see that. At the same time, he was also asked whether or not there is going to be any sort of alternative that Pakistan is going to look for, and what is going to happen if the IMF does not come through, to which the Prime Minister has responded that it is a resilient nation and that we are going to, of course, face up to the crisis and be able to deal with it as we have done so in the past. We also know that earlier the State Minister for Finance also spoke about how there is no real alternative or plan B that is being contemplated upon by the government, and that with the IMF package we require the kind of hope and the kind of support that we need, and that is what the government is focusing on. So it's going to be something that, of course, the country wishes to hear soon, but what sort of hindrances still exist in that actually materialize is, of course, something that still remains to be seen and will be the focus of our discussion in the second segment. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi. We've also been joined online by our guest, Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bader, leader Pakistan People's Party, and we're going to be shortly also joined by Dr. Niaz Murtaza as a political analyst. But let me start with you, Zulfikar Sahab. As part of what is going on with the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf and, of course, the number of party leaders condemning the violence of May 9th, it's important the kind of investigation that is going on with reference to the political elements and their involvement in this entire scenario. Of course, we know that the PTI chairman himself is distanced from this particular incident, but at the same time, there seems to be a lot of evidence that is emerging, especially in terms of what the IGP Punjab Police has spoken about regarding the calls data that have been made on both May 8th and May 9th. In light of such evidence, which clearly connects the incidents of May 9th to the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf leaders and points towards the fact that it was indeed a pre-planned incident, what sort of political future do you think holds true for even those individuals who have spoken about the condemnation of May 9th and distance themselves from the party, and then also party leaders like Dr. Yasmin Rashid?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much, Sana, for inviting me to your show. May 9th is such a bad incident. It's a black day in the history of Pakistan. And the way it has been planned, actually nobody could ever think that to do this kind of attack on the state institutions and state, premises. Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf and its leaders has actually, pre-planned this thing. If in case Mr. Khan is going to be arrested, they have to act on something that shows their eagerness and their sincerity and loyalty to the leadership, that they can go up to any extent. So as per the day 9th May, whatever they have done, they have burned the plane of M.M. Alam Saab, and they have attacked on the Jinnah house, and they have burned the rooms and all the leftovers of Qaeda Muhammad Ali Jinnah. So this shows a couple of things. First is that these people have no political education and they have not been taught politically to act. And normally in these kind of circumstances, when their leader is going to be arrested, they can go up to any extent. They don't even have any kind of sincerity or loyalty to the nation, to the people of Pakistan or to the country. This is one thing. Second thing is, these people have actually taken the law in their hands, and the law is going to deal them very strictly. They should be brought into the law strictly, and they should be treated as like they have committed such a big thing that nobody can. We can only regret what they have done. Now, there are two kind of people. One who were not involved and they understand the importance that what kind of act or event has taken place. They are leaving PTI, and other people who have been a part of this incident, like you took the name of Dr. Yasmin Rashid, and there were many other who actually were the people who actually instigated the people, provoked the people at the grassroots level, who were gathered to celebrate, not actually celebrate, to condemn the arrest of Mr. Khan. So they all have been taken to the Jinnah house, and these people should be taken to the courts, to the cleaners, and these people should be set an example. Because if the law, if the rate of the state and the rate of the government should be challenged, I think then these people from any political parties in future, they may be able to come on the roads, and they have this thing in their mind that on that particular incident nothing happened, and now nothing is going to happen. So these people should be taken to the cleaners and should be done according to the law and constitution of Pakistan. So PTI and their leadership, whatever they have been thinking, the first part I mentioned about the people who actually self-realized they have been leaving the party, and joining other groups or quitting politics or joining some other fiction. These all fictions are going to go in independently in the coming elections. And then we see that what is going to be the outcome, because Pakistan People's Party and other parties have been working on their own, and People's Party is working on the grassroots and have actually given tickets to their candidates and gearing up for the elections. And many of the candidates from PTI and other parties who have a good attribute, a good behavior, and have been nice to the people of the country, and they have been decent enough that our leadership have actually given approval to them to let them join Pakistan People's Party, and so they have joined it.
All right, and we'll talk more about that also in terms of what sort of decision is coming in from parties such as the PPP. But we've also been joined in the debate by Dr. Niaz Murtaza, who's a political analyst. Thank you very much, Dr. Niaz, for being a part of the show. And I want to talk about a little bit with reference to what the IGP Punjab Police has spoken regarding evidence of political involvement, particularly, of course, pointing to Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf leaders. And it's interesting, of course, in terms of the way that this is playing out, especially in terms of what the anti-terrorism court has spoken about with reference to Dr. Yasmin Rashid, and then also what the IGP keeps on talking about. But when we say that this was a pre-planned incident and that the PTI leaders have been involved with reference to the number of calls that have been made with the people who are actually involved in the violence, what seems to be the case in terms of the objective of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf leaders and the way that they would have wanted to move forward with this particular plan, and if that objective is also established as part of the police investigation, what sort of consequence then exists for a party leader or the party in itself in terms of the way that this was actually something that was planned by the party?
Well, we must differentiate between common sense analysis and evidence and court quality evidence. If you're going by common sense evidence, then yeah, I mean, you can, reach any conclusions based on, what we have seen so far. But if you're talking about court quality evidence, you have to show evidence that it was pre-planned, not only in terms of going towards Jinnah House, but actually attacking it and, assaulting people. And I don't know whether, those kind of calls have been, intercepted or not. Then, the second issue would be, even if they have been intercepted, whether, this would be admissible evidence in a court, audio leaks, and so on. So the main issue is whether, you can prove pre-planned assault in a court or not. If you can't prove it to be, pre-planned, then, the plan of, linking, even the people who were not there into a crime, that fizzles out into thin air. Then what you're left with is what happened at the ground level. At the ground level, yes, some crimes may have been committed, but we can compare that with, what happened on January 6th in the US. And, that was much more serious because that attack was on the parliament. There's no more important building in a country than its parliament. And on the May 9th, the parliament wasn't attacked. It was, somebody's palatial house. So, and that is also wrong, but then you have to put things into their proper perspective. And if you look at, the punishments that are being given for January 6th, the vast majority of people have been fined. They have been, made to do community service, or, they have been, put into home confinement. Very few people have been jailed, and the type of people who have been jailed are those who committed serious assault or those who were wielding weapons. And there was one person only who was, charged with and convicted of sedition and sent to jail for 14 years. And that person had a history of, instigating people to overthrow the government. So we need to, be very, very careful. And that's why it's very important that all these, cases are heard in civilian courts where all these nuances are kept in mind. And, we don't have overly harsh punishments given to people, especially people who have done something like this for the first time. Youngsters, we don't want to, destroy their lives forever. If we send them to jail, they might come out as hardened criminals who are a threat to society. So let's be very careful, let's be cool minded, and don't overdo things and don't be too harsh.
Right, absolutely. And that's an important point that you raise, especially in terms of the way that the investigation is going to be carried forward. And of course, with the way that the evidence is collected, and we want the entire investigation to be completed and for the evidence to come out before we can draw any conclusions on that matter. But in terms of what we are seeing right now, Farrukh, especially in terms of how the reaction of different political leaders coming in from Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf seems to be pointing towards, there's of course a lot of people who are abandoning ship, who are talking about leaving the party based on May 9th. And even though some are saying that they are not pointing towards the PTI chairman's direct involvement in the matter, but they do believe that the party leadership had some responsibility in curtailing the violence. So when we speak about evidence in terms of this being pre-planned or the party's involvement in the matter, do you think it's also important to take note of what the party could have done about the situation?
Right, Sana, I think that these are important questions and they are being repeatedly asked. And we are going to actually get to them as well. I just wanted to actually add to what was said earlier regarding the way Yasmin Rashid Sahiba was actually allowed to go free. There are many things that are important to understand in this country. You see, unlike the US, because recently we saw the example of January 6th, and there we saw geofencing being used. Remember those awesome visuals that showed that how Trump rallies supporters, right, suddenly actually moved towards the Capitol Hill and suddenly attacked it. So that was done through geofencing. All the mobiles were being tracked and how they actually had a direct link. So these are very important evidence is created this way. But our law and our prosecution system is such that we are still living in Stone Age. A lot of law actually belongs to more than 100 years ago. So because of that, things actually get complicated. For example, in Yasmin Rashid Sahiba's case, we have seen something very interesting, that the prosecuting officer was not able to actually frame the FIR in a way where she could have been actually named properly, and the charges could also be framed properly. When that doesn't happen, any court will find it difficult to detain the person. But then there is another problem. Remember, let me refresh your memory, when the former guy was still Prime Minister and he was about to lose power at that time, because we were facing economic challenges also, and we were similarly seeing instability. I told you that we are entering into a long crisis, right? People use poly crisis, other terms, but I call it long crisis, where things are so stuck that it takes a lot of time and a lot of toll to overcome things. So what happened when PTI was allowed after 22 years to get to power? Allowed by the people of Pakistan, but nevertheless, they were actually brought to power. That opened a door backwards, especially this tabdili on acid was such that they actually kept on planting their people everywhere. Amazingly, then they also understand how things work in the Islamic Republic. So let me give you one very interesting example of how the geofencing system was cheated by one gentleman, and that is Chaudhry Parvez Elahi. When he was about to be apprehended at that time, he had two mobiles. He asked his servants to actually sit on motorcycles and take those phones and keep on moving around, so that there is so much confusion that Parvez Elahi cannot be spotted, right? This is how things actually kept on going. So when you have that kind of pushback, when you have that kind of understanding of how things work, then there are a mighty number of holdovers in prosecution, in other departments as well, and they keep on trying to slow down the process. Finally, there is this unresolved issue of the Chief Justice of Lahore High Court's son-in-law, who was a senior minister when Parvez Elahi was the Chief Minister of Punjab. And since then we have heard that somehow there's some linkage between the concessions that are constantly given to PTI and his political position. So because of all these things, we keep on seeing that things are complicated, but what happens in the end? By doing nothing or by actually obstructing the system, these people are rendering the regular system futile, right? There are, of course, people who have been wronged. For example, Jinnah House was a Corps Commander house, and when it was burned down, and when the Shodas, various buildings were attacked, when agencies were attacked, with all that, there are people who are demanding justice. So what will happen then in the end? All of these cases will end up in military courts or somewhere else where they have more say and you don't. So by actually helping these people, evade law, you're helping undermine the very system that safeguards your and my safety. And because of that, we are in this thick soup, and things are not getting better. But I tell you one thing for sure, one way or the other, all of these people will face accountability, because last time also you pointed out that somebody who might have been involved in arson all of a sudden comes in a press conference, states something on record and says that I am detaching myself from PTI, and all of a sudden they become all okay.
Yeah.
So that is something that is not happening. For example, in Punjab, there was PTI spokesperson and her husband. Both were arrested. Then they came on television and they spoke about their decision to part ways with PTI, and they actually condemned what happened on May 9. But then they certainly thought that all the cases will be removed or quashed. That did not happen. So where the system is working, it is working diligently, but then there is this conflict within the state or the society that will take some time to actually go away. But once it does, the country is going to emerge stronger out of it.
Right. And I also, Farrukh, want to explore a little bit of what Dr. Niaz was saying in terms of the people involved or the youngsters involved, or people who are perhaps swayed by whatever was going on and have committed something for the first time. How much responsibility are we going to be able to put on them rather than party leaders or people who were instigating the violence? And then in terms of consequence, what will be the appropriate consequence?
Right, and that is a very good question, Sana, and I must compliment you on this. In every revolution, the people who actually face the brunt are mostly the foot soldiers, the people who are lower cadres, right? Because they are the first to actually, in every failed revolution, I meant, what happens is that when they are apprehended, nobody is there to actually rescue them. The former guy, has actually thrown most of them under the bus by saying that they were not even his party members. But the fact is that the poorest children will face far more difficult conditions because there's nobody who is actually lobbying. Compare it with a lady, a designer who was apprehended because she comes from a very decorated lineage. Because of that, all the elements were together and trying to lobby for her and try to find a safe passage out of the system. So that will continue for a bit, but I think that the conviction on the part of those who want to bring them to accountability is very clear. They are not going to spare anybody. But then there is another problem. Remember that these people have stayed in power for 4 years or perhaps slightly more than that, and they have sowed so many, landmines into the system. So what happens right now? When you actually bring their senior leadership to accountability, you have seen that one guy was apprehended and all of a sudden May 9th happened, right? Similarly, when you take them to court, there is always a chance that it reminds me not of January 6th. By the way, January 6th has also seen that Trump has walked free. Umpteen other senior leaders have walked free, but the poor Johnnies who were on the street or who attacked the building were actually apprehended. But having said that, it actually conjures another image, and that is of a failed putsch in Germany, whose architect was taken to court, and there in the presence of judges, audience, and cameras, he actually used that as a vehicle to further spread his propaganda. That becomes a problem as well. So right now, while you're dealing with many antiquated systems and you're looking at many problems that might be there, but they make no mistakes. It will all come together, and people who have actually perpetrated this failed coup will be, brought to book.
All right, that's the hope. Mr. Zulfikar, the issue with reference to, of course, the PTI leaders who are now taking note of what has happened on May 9th and claiming, of course, that they want to distance themselves from this incident and also leaving the party or politics in general are important in terms of what their future holds and how they're going to be incorporated into different political parties. And you said earlier also that the PPP has welcomed some and will be welcoming those people who show some strength of character or align with the party's principles. And I understand that, but in terms of the kind of factions that we are seeing spring up or the different sorts of alignment within this entire leadership who has left Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, do you think that there's perhaps more room in terms of incorporating these individuals within different political parties, or do you think that some sort of viable opposition or a different sort of party emergence can possibly be there, which can also be something that the PPP is thinking about?
Actually, there are two kinds of people. One are those that they want to join any of the political party right away, and they want to use some political party's platform. Other people are who have actually left the PTI and they don't want to continue with that particular party. So when they are in numbers, they are making their own fractions, groups. By the name of one of them is Democrats, other one is being led by Mr. Tareen. So these all people are getting together and they are trying to figure out, they want to come out of that chaos and they want to understand what future holds for them and what is the best strategy, what is the best thing that they can do in order to save their,
Zulfikar Sahab, can you also add to that, what sort of value do you put with reference to the group that is emerging as Democrats, because they of course have emphasized on their individuality, claim that they're not going to be part of any other party and that they will not even register with the ECP. So what value will they hold in the political arena for PPP or other parties?
Yeah, I mean, till the time they don't get, registered themselves with the ECP, they are going to be independent group by the name of Democrats. But I think they will certainly be thinking about joining some of the, or getting in alliance with some of the political parties, because without political parties, it will be very difficult for them to go in the public and contest and get the, to back the votes from the people. So this will be the strategy, and they are currently, doing the brainstorming, trying to gather the information at the grassroots level, trying to make alliances and asking people to join and increase their numbers. So it's going to take a little time, but eventually they will be joining some of the political party, either in alliance with them or in some kind of a collaboration. Because as an independent group, I don't see there any kind of future in politics, because they may be there in the politics, but as for electables and to get into the parliament, it will be very important for them to collaborate with some group.
All right, Dr. Niaz, when we take a look at the situation, especially now when we see that the PTI chairman seems to be away from different political leaders that have left him, away from perhaps the mainstream media as well, and then also in terms of where we see the politics of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf going forward, a lot of it seems to be disintegrating into something which seems to put him in a lonely spot. But at the moment when we look at the situation and the way that there has been different political history with reference to different political parties and the situation turning around, do you think there is any way forward in which the current PTI chairman will be able to secure not just some sort of valid or importance to himself or even the party? Hold that thought with this question. I'll take a short break and be back. Welcome back to the debate. We're going to be, of course, taking a look further at what is happening in terms of the political arena. And Dr. Niaz, before we took the break, I was asking you with reference to what is going on, especially in terms of the different PTI leaders leaving the party and, of course, distancing themselves from the current PTI chairman. It seems that he is now very, very isolated at the moment in terms of his reach and his political significance. And I want to understand whether or not there is a way for this situation to change or for him to be able to secure something for himself or the party in the future, or do you think that now, as we remember the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, it would cease to exist as we remember and would emerge into the sort of countless factions that we are seemingly seeing at the moment?
Well, there are two sides of the coin. The one side is, that some entities are arm twisting politicians, and that should be condemned. But then the other side of the coin is, how easily people are changing their loyalties on such, minor arm twisting. Whereas, the people, leaders of other parties spent months in jail without flinching. These people are leaving the party just, by being in jail for a week, 2 weeks. And there are so many people who haven't even gone to jail. I think the majority of the people who have left PTI are those who haven't spent a single day in jail. They have just left it because they can see which way the wind is blowing now, and it's blowing away from PTI. So that just shows that, they have no character, they have no political commitments, convictions, ideology. And, when the majority of the people in a party are like that, you have to wonder about, the foundations of that party. What kind of a party was it, and whether, it should even be called a party, or was it just a collection of, people traveling together? In terms of,
Dr. Niaz, I also want to understand in terms of party loyalties, what does this mean, or what sort of space does loyalty even have in politics, especially in terms of one's allegiance to a certain party? I mean, they seem to say that the principles or ideologies shifted and they want to part ways. Is that not something that politicians do?
Other parties, people spent months, years in jail without flinching. They did not jump the ship, they stayed with the party. That shows some commitment to the ideology, to, the family, to the sense of being part of a party. And, you have dozens and dozens of people in PPP who have never changed parties, who've always been with PPP, and they'll stay there. Same with, the PMLN. But if you look at PTI, there are very few people who've been with the PTI for more than 5 to 10 years. Most people are, like in transition from one party to another. So in terms of what Mr. Imran Khan can still salvage from the situation, I think he has a very bleak short-term future, at least short-term, and it may even be long-term. I don't see him, forget, two-thirds majority, forget a simple majority. It will be hard for him to, go beyond his, you can look at the 4 election outcomes that we've had in the last 2 decades. Would it be like 2002 when he just won 1 seat? I don't think it will be that bad. Would it be like 2008 when he basically boycotted the elections? That's possible. If he's pushed too far into a corner, he might just announce that, I'm boycotting, or the official PTI is boycotting it. Or it could be like 2013 when he got about 30 to 40 seats. I think that's the most likely scenario. And then 2018 is impossible, where, the establishment actually helped him win. So it's between, boycotting and getting about 20, 30 seats. That's the maximum I think he can hope for. And even in the long term, given his advanced age and given how easily the party has collapsed, I think it's going to be very difficult for him to make a comeback, and that too without, the support of powers that be. So I don't see a very, rosy future for Imran Khan or for PTI.
All right, absolutely. Dr. Niaz, stay with us for the next segment as well. But thank you very much, Zulfikar Ali Bader Saab, for joining us and being a part of the debate. Farrukh, anything you'd like to add very quickly before we move on to the next one?
I've waited for my turn, so allow me to a little bit more than quickly. But regarding ideology, I tell you there's something that is problematic here. We keep on saying that ideology matters, but ideology in Pakistan, there's only one ideology, and that is a right-wing ideology. The national narrative of consciousness has shifted so much towards the right that now the two major parties that keep on battling it out most of the time, that is PMLN and PTI, both are center of their right parties. Then there's People's Party that used to be leftist party. Now it is primarily a centrist party. And I wouldn't actually think much of the idea that you keep on endlessly sacrificing for a political party, because in Pakistani politics, it is politics of electables. Remember, one guest actually came to this program and brought up Dr. Hamza Alvi's work. Dr. Hamza Alvi has been talking about the fact that when Pakistan was created in India and East Pakistan was there, India and East Pakistan carried out land reforms. West Pakistan, current Pakistan did not. So whatever elite exists in the country are all elitist. They come from landed background, and now they have actually turned into other businesses as well. Right now, it is the politics of electables. So whosoever does it for any party actually does it for the cost of their own future, at the cost of their own future. People's Party used to be an ideological party, but ask people what happened to J.A. Rahim during Bhutto Sahib's own time. So they also had to face persecution from the people who actually supported them, right? But I'm not going there. My humble submission is that you were talking about Democrats group and people like that. Remember that every party has some great people and some awful people. Sadly, so far what we have seen is that the people who are actually capable and have been praising are slow on repositioning themselves, and we still haven't heard from them where exactly they are headed. But people like Murtaza, or for that matter, your favorite the other day you were bringing up Buzdar Sahab, people like them, wherever they go, they are going to be deadbeat. But it also reminds me of something that happened in 2018. It was not only PMLN which was shrunken, but there used to be a Jeeps group, right? A Jeep group that was a group of independents led by Chaudhry Nisar. And their purpose was that if, for example, PMLN somehow manages to undermine or undercut PTI's numbers, there will be one independent group of dissidents from PMLN that will shore them up. So at this moment also, I think this is the similar kind of situation that is going to happen. One last thing, Sana, regarding this idea that the former guy or the chairman PTI keeps on saying that whosoever he is going to nominate is going to be elected, he doesn't need electable. The problem right now is that whosoever gets elected, whether he is from his party or somebody else, will, after taking oath, within 5 minutes desert the party and go somewhere else. I can tell you, because the system is such that PTI is not going to come to power unless some miracle happens. So with that kind of a situation, I think that it is better not to spread yourself too thin or keep on thinking about ambitions that you cannot fulfill.
Right. We're now going to be talking about the economic situation of the country, of course, with the Prime Minister talking about the IMF and that there's good news for the country. Dr. Niaz, it seems, of course, that there's very little time for this good news to actually materialize. There's, of course, the 9th review to be completed, the staff level agreement, the board meeting, and all of that in less than a month's time. But the Prime Minister still seems to be very hopeful in this regard, that all the conditions for the 9th review have been met by Pakistan. And this is, of course, after he's had a conversation with the IMF MD earlier, with the IMF also giving its statement regarding the political situation, and the finance ministers also speaking about how this is Pakistan's option moving forward. What do you think is the likelihood of this deal actually closing before the 30th of June?
Well, I think, hopeful and, positive vibes have started coming from both sides. Even the IMF, there was a statement that, we hope to, complete the process before the end of this month. And, it's really up to IMF, they can, quickly do the staff level agreement and, just 1 or 2 days before the board meeting and present it there. So I don't think there is an issue. And, if it does go through, what it will show is that, the deal was not being held up because of technical issues or Pakistan's failure to meet, the real substantive terms and conditions related to fiscal deficit or current account deficit or the rupee value. It was mainly because of politics, IMF's, ploy of putting more and more pressure on Pakistan to make sure that the budget that it presents is not overly, full of, lavish expenditures that cannot be afforded at this point in time. So, if once IMF makes up its mind that, yeah, this deal has to go through, then I don't think it will be any problem. But then, of course, it will mean that, the budget will have to be very tight. There can't be any, lavish expenditures within it, lose fiscal targets and so on. But I think once we have the IMF deal, that will put Pakistan on a surer footing where we can relax all these administrative measures that we have in place to choke imports, and that will help the economy regain some space for economic activity to take place, more normal imports to come in, and then still there being enough reserves so that Pakistan doesn't default because of the looser restrictions on imports.
Right, and Dr. Niaz, with reference to the budget also, that when we see, of course, is an important aspect of whether or not it's going to impact the IMF. There seems to be that this has to be a responsible budget and not something that the country cannot afford, but also there is a lot of political pressure on the government to provide relief to the masses. What sort of budget do you expect that the government can actually move forward, which doesn't have any objections by the IMF?
Well, I think one hopeful statement that has come out is that, they said that, you can give targeted subsidies and relief to the poor if you, achieve the fiscal space through progressive taxation, which means, taxing the rich people who are out of the, loop right now. And that opens up, several avenues. So there was a talk by Mr. Ishaq Dar, some mention about, taxing assets, a wealth tax, for example, on a second house, on land, and those kind of assets. And there were good figures given of, 100, 150 billion rupees that may be generated. There are other options like taxing agriculture, like taxing real estate, the traders and so on, but all that requires political will. So if the government is willing to, expend the political capital and, tax some of these constituencies, and then it can generate some savings, then it can spend them on the poor through targeted subsidies, and that would be okay with the IMF. So I think it's a very thin line path for the government to walk, and I hope they take the right decisions this time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dr. Niaz Murtaza, for being with us and being a part of the discussion. Farrukh, it seems that Pakistan does not have a plan B, which is what the statement is coming from the State Minister of Finance. But if we don't have the IMF, what are we going to do? The Prime Minister seems hopeful that we will be resilient.
Right. First of all, I think that it is important to clarify that that moment, initially it was thought that perhaps government wants to go for a plan B. So that's why I think the Minister of State actually clarified that we are not looking for a plan B. I think it is important to go to the doctor and get healthy, a clean bill of health. And the grapevine has it, Sana, that there was this difference between a slight difference of 3 billion, 6 billion financing gap, right? Pakistan had arranged 3 billion, and then the expectation was that Pakistan has to actually find 6 billion. So somehow that issue has been resolved. And if that is done, what happens then? It actually does not affect the 9th review only. I think after you conclude 9th review very quickly, then you can go for a new program, because now we know that the 10th and 11th review will perhaps not happen because the deadline has come, and IMF has this stringent condition that the program cannot go beyond 4 years. So now maturity time has come, and by the end of this month, there can't be this program actually, continuing beyond this time. So we'll have to go for another program. Okay. Regarding the budget, very quickly, PSDP is going to be always something that is going to be debated, because a lot of corruption also takes place there. ADP also right? But the most important thing that actually has to be looked at has nothing to do with your fiscal policy. It has to do with your monetary policy, and that is the policy rate, the interest rate. The interest rate at this moment in this country is killing any kind of economic growth.
Right.
So that is something that you'll have to renegotiate with IMF and your own people to bring it down. It is really staggering and horrible.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Farrukh, for that. And of course, there seems to be some sort of hope that is emanating from the top leadership, and we hope that we hear good news soon. There's not a lot of time, but of course, the government is trying its best, and the IMF is also saying that it's committed to working with Pakistan in this regard. So let's see what the news brings in. That's all that we have from the debate. See you tomorrow.